New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here. Welcome to another episode of the Inclusive Church right here on the New Thought Media Network. I'm so glad that you've joined in today. Every week we get the opportunity to slow down for a minute and think about, talk about, imagine about what it takes to build, grow, maintain a church that's inclusive. And every week I remind myself and you that I am purposely reclaiming the word church so that I'm very clear. We're talking about the church as a community of people who come together to learn and practice and encourage the use of spiritual principle in the way that they live their lives. And church is not a reference to a building, with four walls or a series of walls and a steeple and a bell, that the physical, the property is nothing unless there are people who are engaging in the practice and the learning of spiritual principle. So that's why we're the inclusive church and not the inclusive ministry or the inclusive something else. And just in case I use the word leader, which I think I will be using a lot today, I'm not just saying leader as a synonym for minister. I'm saying that there are all kinds of leaders in our spiritual communities, and all kinds of leaders are needed in our churches in order for them to grow, in order for them to achieve the mission. So leaders who are heading up a volunteer team, leaders who are serving on your board of trustees, leaders who are donating money or committing money to key efforts and initiatives. Every one of those and many, many, many others are the leaders who make or break your commitment to be inclusive. So today, a couple of weeks ago, I had a great time with Reverend Sunshine Day. And if you missed that one, you'll want to check out the playlist or just go scroll down depending on which platform you're on and check that out. And coming up soon, I'll be having a conversation with Reverend Vicki Jeter. But today is a toolkit day, so that means I'm going to just give you something to think about and try my best to do that in 30 minutes or less. So the theme for today, building community in an inclusive church. There are a lot of different ways we could go with that theme. And I'm going to read you a passage from a book that I was recently rereading, and then talk about the challenges of building community based on this particular passage. Yes, I know there are many, many different ways to talk about how you build or not build community where there's a lot of inclusion. This book, I was rereading it in relation to a course that I'm teaching. And I was rereading it to decide whether I wanted to make the whole book required reading or if I wanted to pull some excerpts from it. And the book is Bridging Divided Worlds, Generational Cultures in Congregations. Bridging Divided Worlds, Generational Cultures in Congregations. And it's a really good book written by Jackson Carroll and Wade Clark Ruth. And in the chapter, and it does pretty much focus on generational cultures and the challenge of having multiple generations in the same church. But in so doing, it also reflects quite a bit on ethnic cultures as well, because a number of the examples are reflect intersectionality. So not just by age, but if you are dealing with young people or older people, and then there's also an overlay of race or ethnicity, that the expectations are different. So just like any other age group, if we looked at, what do millennials want or expect or need, and then it's like it's not uniform. There are additional differences based on race or culture, race or ethnicity, as well as generational culture. So in this chapter, which is titled We've Always Done It This Way, which of course, if you are saying that, you are in total resistance to change. The authors are landing on congregations and inherited traditions and the ways that different congregations, it's just like, well, when I came here, that's how it was done. And then I started doing it that way. And then I taught other people to do it that way. And we've just always done it that way. But in this particular passage, there is a lot about community. So they are talking about a particular church that in this case is a Catholic church. And so that may influence some of what you hear, but I want you to then extrapolate that or apply that to the spiritual community or communities you are part of. This is a quote from the director of the church's sister. The word program is a real Anglo idea. Mexicans, I've found out, are not on time. I mean, it's not something necessarily bad, but they just have a different concept of what time is. When you have programs, they don't respond well to it. What they like to do is socialize. And when they come to church, they expect to socialize in a positive way. I think a lot of the Anglo churches, they go like, well, we're going to have this youth group and we're going to follow the guidelines the archdiocese says that we should follow. But we don't do things like that. They don't respond well to that. Believe me, I've tried. She also pointed to a related contrast. Mexicans are very family oriented in their religious participation. Most activities take place in a family type environment, she said. You don't have this Americanization that says, well, you're a kid, so you go off in a corner. In the Anglo churches, when a kid cries, they take him out of the church. In our church, the kids will be crawling down the middle of the aisle. The kids will be crying, but no one expects the mom to get up and leave. That's just a thing of life. When we come together for fiestas or for anything, it's everybody. It's one and all. And everybody's running around. They don't judge you by your age. It's a family. And end quote, I loved this reminder as I was rereading this a few days ago. I loved this reminder that how we define community and how we go about building community can be hugely affected by our cultural definition of community. And I have experienced this myself in a variety of communities, thinking about what's accepted or what is normal or what the majority of people are comfortable with. There have been a number of things that when I've been in a predominantly white spiritual community or church, that it seems as if everybody really loves. And for me, it feels like culturally inappropriate or culturally uncomfortable. And some of that is okay. Some of that is, I know I am one of very few people in this predominantly white church, and so I'm going to adapt. But if we are committed to building inclusive churches, it means everybody has to adapt some. Everybody. So that means maybe, maybe there are different types of music used in different types of events or programs or in classes. And if I'm the teacher of a class and I only play the music I grew up with or the music I personally like, why would I expect that all the students, let's say that there are 20 students in the class, why would I expect that all 20 of them would like the exact same music I like? So if I'm playing music at different breaks, I want to play different genres of music at different times. Or if it's a multi-week class, right, over the course of 4 weeks or 6 weeks or 10 weeks, whatever the duration is, that I'm going to mix it up throughout the entire series of weeks with music. Same thing with quotations, same thing with the examples that I use. And we've talked about this before. It's kind of a bare minimum standard when we think about being inclusive. This passage in this chapter in this book reminded me of so many ways. And sure, it's in the language, like when the quote is, the word program is a real Anglo idea. And she contrasts that with a family gathering. Like we have a program that has a very defined structure and you will do it this way. But if you are engaging with people, in this case, the example is Mexican Americans and people of Mexican descent who are living in the US. But a similar thing or a similar comment might be made if you consider African American culture. And again, any culture where the focus is on community, but you're designing around hierarchy. Let me say that again. If you are trying to reach people who culturally are driven by community, by group, by multi-generational groups being together, and everything, and that it's fluid, that there's flexibility within some broad guidelines, but you are designing your programs around pretty narrow or strict guidelines and a structure that is very linear, that it doesn't make it wrong, but you will have the answer to your question if your question is, why don't more people from that cultural group participate in what we offer? And we probably would say in our programs. They may be looking for an environment where it is an interactive, engaging experience, and you are presenting structured, linear, step-by-step program. I love that. Of course, I chose where to begin the reading, but as she's quoting, as Maria is being quoted, I found out Mexicans, I've found out, are not on time. I mean, it's not something necessarily bad, but they just have a different concept of what time is. And of course, it's not just Mexicans, right? There are so many groups that are fluid around start time or when to show up, or culturally, there is a pattern of, oh, that's the start time. And there's a lot of, stuffy things that are going to get covered. So I don't need to be there until this time. And if there is a lot of pushback on that, then those are the people who will be like, well, hey, I don't need that headache. I can go somewhere else, right? I don't have to come here. And I'm laughing a little bit because, for many, many years, that was me. I was visiting a spiritual community on a regular basis. And so once I knew their order of service, they were going to sing some little, in Tracy think at that time, some little wimpy song that didn't move me in any way, except maybe intellectually the lyrics made sense, but it didn't move me or inspire me. And then they were going to have announcements, which, have a series of people come forward and make announcements about what was going on. And that was going to, take about 6 to 8 minutes. And then there was going to be the meet and greet time where people were going to be hugging each other like they loved each other, which, when I would be there, people would hug me, but it was like, it felt fake and phony. And then, there'd be a prayer, but the talk itself wouldn't start usually until about 20 minutes after the start of the hour. And after being on time, quote unquote, on time a few times, it's like, yeah, I don't need any of that. I don't need any of that. And I would plan so that I would show up at 20 after. And unless there had been some announcement earlier about something that was, going to be happening at the beginning of the service, I felt no need to be there. And there was a little judgment about that, or at least it felt like there was a little judgment about that, but I didn't care. And then ultimately I stopped visiting that community. But not because I found another community where I felt like we were truly engaged and interacting, or we were actually was actually the integration of things culturally that related to me, or that there were no people on the platform who were presenting in any way that was different. Um, so I understand, and maybe that's why this passage really grabbed me, because we say we want to build an inclusive community, but then we base our community, on one culture and one age group. Now, when I say it out loud and say it like that, then my brain goes, well, that's silly. If you want to grow and if you want to include lots of different people, why would you base everything you do on one age group and one racial or ethnic cultural group? And right, it makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense. But community after community after community after community has done that, continues to do that. And then we don't understand why people visit 2 or 3 times, if we're lucky, and don't come back. They don't see themselves, they don't feel that they can be themselves, and they keep hitting or running into situations or programmatic decisions that also don't fit what engages them, what inspires them. So rather than talk for the full 30 minutes about what's wrong about that, let me spend a few minutes on what we can do instead. So obviously what we can do instead is we can set the intention to represent different cultural norms, different genres, different preferences, different ways of interacting, number one. Number two, what we can do about that is that we can actually seek out the ideas and the needs and the perceptions and the expectations of people who are different from ourselves. When have you been in a community that really felt like home? And what part of that can we integrate into the way that we do our service? Or what part of that could we use to create something completely new? I love the example of the spiritual community who had a young adult group and invited that young adult group, people who were in their 20s and 30s, to like, what would be cool? Like, what would you like to do? And what day of the week and what time of the day? And knowing that that led to the creation of Saturday mimosa brunch, and or Saturday brunch with mimosas or something like that, because they were like, well, we don't want to meet on Friday night because it's the end of the week, we want to party, or we want to go out, or we just want to decompress from the week, and we don't want to meet on Saturday night because that's definitely a hangout night. We're not coming to church service on Sunday morning. Like, that's just not an option. And so, yeah, Saturday late morning, yeah, that probably works really well. Still have the afternoon to go shopping or run errands, and don't have to get up really early because I got up early all week. Like, all of that brainstorming came together, and Saturday late morning came up, and someone, said, well, a lot of times on Saturday or Sunday, I go out to brunch. They're like, well, we could make it a brunch because people like food. And so we do a potluck brunch, or later, I believe they assign people like to take turns on providing brunch. But initially it was like, yeah, we could do a potluck brunch. And then someone was like, but it's a church. When I go to brunch, I have a mimosa. They're like, you can have mimosas. mimosas aren't illegal as long as you're over the legal drinking age. And so it became a thing, right? And it became an environment that they created, they co-created, they loved it, and they came together and had conversation about a different spiritual principle or idea and how to apply that in the lives of 20 and 30-year-olds. And it's like that never would have happened if the people who were quote unquote running the church had decided, what do we think will draw our 20 and 30-year-olds into a meaningful conversation about what we teach and how to apply it in their lives. So go to the people for whatever group, whether it's by race or ethnicity, whether it's by age, whether it's by language. Make sure that they are having input, the members of that group or people who are knowledgeable about that group are helping to plan whatever you do. And then the big thing I want you to keep in mind, because it's partly what I am really, really focused on. So I'd be curious about your ideas too. What I really want to invite you to think about is this. So how can we do church in a way that represents this different way of building community? So partly it's easy to say, well, we're going to have our traditional Sunday service the way that we've always done it, as in the chapter title of this chapter in this book. And then we'll do something else on the side for people that doesn't work for. But I'm asking a slightly different question. What if our primary way of bringing people together actually was redesigned to be one where community means people who are different from each other, people from different age groups, people with different backgrounds are interacting together in a meaningful way. And it's not just a class, it's the experience. And so be thinking about that this week. Or if you have any specific ideas that just come to your mind right now, then you could drop those in the chat as well, because it's really, really at the forefront of my mind. What would be, I guess some people would say, what would be out of the box? And I'm just thinking about what's next. What are some ways to engage people, even if it's on a Sunday morning, but not in the traditional church service format? So all of that in service to building community, that's the theme for today. I'm really hoping that I've given you something to think about and maybe to talk about with others, that this topic of how we build community, knowing we have people from different backgrounds and with different cultural norms, all of that is what I invite you to pay attention to during the coming week. And then I hope very much you'll join me again next Tuesday at noon Mountain Time for a conversation with Reverend Vicki Jeter. That's it for this week. Be inclusive, and I'll see you again soon.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.